Alrighty, here we go. My name is Travis Neville. This is the Travis Neville Podcast. I wrote this book called Ideal Man, Reviving Masculinity. You can get that anywhere books are sold. It's at Walmart. It's on Amazon. You can get it on Audible. It's me reading it. You can go to my website, travisneville.com, and grab it there. If you do that, I will sign it for you. Let's shut the door. Here we go. Yeah, so that's going on. I just sent the new book. It's going to be called, it is called, it's not going to be called, it's called Ideal Man, Mastering Masculinity. It is an accounting of the outcomes that you can expect if you have done the habits in reviving masculinity correctly. So if you have been faithfully executing these habits, these are mastering masculinity are the things you can expect to have in your life after that, which I'm very proud of. Yeah, that just went to the publisher, so waiting on the first round of edits, working on cover design, stuff like that. So I would expect within the next 2 weeks, I'll have a link on my website where you can pre-order, which is pretty cool. Pretty pumped about that. Yeah, so that's how that's going. I would like to talk about getting out of your comfort zone today. I had an experience last weekend where I did exactly that. I got a good buddy who was a colleague in the construction world and a good dude. He introduced me to a couple of his friends, also real good guys, and they invited me to go on a kayaking trip. Actually, three of us were on kayaks. One dude was in a canoe. But yeah, I live in northern Michigan, and it was like March 1st and 2nd and 3rd. It was cold out. I mean, like we had pretty nice weather. We'd get up to 45, 50 during the day, but it was 28 at night. And you better believe that that river was pretty cold. So, um, and I have a kayak, and I've had it for 15 years, but there are a lot of summers where it never leaves my garage. Um, Long story short, I don't have a tremendous amount of skills on the thing. I mean, I can cruise around a lake really no problem, but I'm still wobbly getting in and out of it. I mean, I'm not a pro by any stretch of the imagination. And this trip required me to pack everything I need for, 2 nights and 3 days of paddling on the water. Um, and that was a lot, like I like peanut butter and honey sandwiches, I think, trail mix, jerky, stuff that I knew I could kind of stash away because I didn't know if we're gonna have cooking facility. It turns out I was right to do that because we were on basically state land the whole time. Like you'd paddle and get off the water. Like the first day we paddled for like 4 or 5 hours and ended up at a site that looked like other people had camped there. Like it had some rocks and some ashes. It looked like people had fires there. Certainly not since last year, but we camped there and but man, like that whole first day, I just was fucking terrified. Like I was not comfortable in that boat because and it wasn't. It 100% had to do with the fact that I knew how cold the water was. The water temperature was probably 40. And I mean, it's not going to take long for that to kill you if you're not, wearing a wetsuit essentially. And I know enough about what to wear outdoors to stay alive when you're wet, but that doesn't mean you're going to be not shivering and not really uncomfortable, So that's what was hanging over my head that whole first day. I'm like, we're on this river, like I said, middle of nowhere. It's not like there's people all along the shore. It's not like there's other boaters. We saw one guy on a boat the whole time. And he just had a flat bottom motorboat, and it looked like he just crossed the river because we did go by some private property to work on his hunting blind. So I mean, there was nobody doing what we did because it's so damn cold out, right? And yeah, I knew that if I ended up in that water, I was gonna have to First of all, my boat would tip over, all my stuff would fall out. Like I had a lot of stuff strapped down, but some stuff I didn't. And that would have meant instantly I had to be on the side of the river. If it was even a place where there was dry land, because a lot of the land right next to this river was like floodplain. So it's just like marshy, right? So I got to get far enough down the river to get to a dry spot, which might take an hour. And now you got to build a fire and dry everything out, and that's hours of time. And I knew, the dangers of what I was trying to do, what we were doing. Um, and then the second day we went, there's probably 10 hours of paddling, and that's a lot, right? And thankfully I keep myself in good shape. So, like the physical part of it was not terribly difficult. I mean, my shoulders were a little sore from doing the same thing for hours, right? It's not a thing you do in the gym. Um, but yeah, mentally, it took a toll on me. I like that first night after only 4 or 5 hours of paddling, and there really wasn't anything terribly challenging on the water. The water was it's the Black River in between Presque Isle and Sheboygan County in northern lower peninsula of Michigan. So the water wasn't moving that fast, 4 or 5 miles an hour, not a big deal. But just the whole time kind of having it hang over your head that if you go in this water, I mean, there's a possibility that you could die, right? Um, and that is uncomfortable to be thinking about that for as long as I was. So, we get to that first campsite and, instantly, like the first thing I didn't set up my tent, I didn't do anything. I started a fire because that just, man, let me tell you, I figured that out on this trip. Fire is life. And it doesn't matter what other situation you have going on. If you have a fire, you can survive. As long as you got fire and fuel for it, you can survive. Uh, yeah, started the fire, and I have a tent, but it's not meant for winter. It's just gonna keep like snow off you essentially at night. And then I have a sleeping bag that was just barely adequate. It was warm enough to keep me alive, but I'm fully dressed inside this sleeping bag, right? Wool sock, everything. The only thing I took off was my boots. Like everything else, I was still wearing, and I get in this like cocoon-shaped sleeping bag and sleep for the night. And actually, I slept okay. And I think it was because I was so exhausted from being so uncomfortable and on high alert the whole day, right? And I started thinking about that, and that's the point here. That's what I'm trying to tell you, is that you have to get yourself uncomfortable regularly. It seems real cliche, but being comfortable, being uncomfortable, like get comfortable being uncomfortable was kind of the order of the day, um, order of the weekend. So, I make it through those first 4 hours and I eat some food and I'm like, my eyes are just wide open. Like, I'm like, fuck, man, and again, if it was 70 degrees out and the water was 60 degrees, totally different story. That situation is it's nothing. I'd go in the water and wouldn't think twice about it. It wouldn't be a problem at all. But, when it's that cold, it just adds a layer of danger for sure. But, getting comfortable being uncomfortable. I spent the whole winter sitting in my office right here, writing my third book and taking care of business things and, doing some construction on my house. I still got little detail stuff to finish. I got some tile work to do. I did all the trim. I built my dining room table. I did some stuff like that. But none of that was outside of my comfort zone. Like that was all real easy. So I had a very cushy winter, is what I'm trying to say. So that was a reason why trip was really good for me. And that's why a thing like this would be very good for you. I'll go more and more into the upsides of this as we go. So far, I'm just kind of telling the story and complaining. But I noticed that the next morning, when it came to getting back in the boat, I wasn't nearly as afraid. I was starting to feel comfortable with the situation, right? And I wasn't like 5 hours in the kayak didn't make me any better at it. The water didn't get any warmer. Like nothing had changed situationally, but my mind was calmer. Like I just was starting to get used to it. And as a result of that, I noticed that I was far less jerky, right? And that's the thing that, that's what hurts you. When I'm on ladders all summer, I'm already long ago in my life, I got pretty comfortable being up on them, so I don't, jerk around. It's the scary movements that put you in a bad position. That's why people say that your fears will cause your worst nightmares to come true. If you're up on a ladder and you're afraid of heights, any little thing happening, somebody walking by and tapping it, or the wind blowing, you'll have like a physical reaction, and that's what takes you down, right? And that's the situation in the boat too. When you're in a kayak, if you kind of overcompensate and you do it kind of hard, that's what's going to take you down. That's what's going to put you in the water. Is essentially being afraid is what's going to do it. Whereas if you were calm and a thing happened, you would just kind of deal with it, right? It's definitely the same situation when you're driving. You know, I drive in the winter a lot. I live in northern Michigan. And if you keep your inputs very smooth, you're not jerking the wheel when you get scared, you're not stabbing on the brakes when you feel yourself slide a little bit, you're going to be a lot better off. Whereas if you do have those jerky, fear-induced movements, that's when you put your car in the ditch. That's when you end up rubber side up, and that's when you get into trouble. So very literally, your fear will cause all your worst fears to come true. So that's what I did most of this trip. Certainly on that second day, I spent so much of my time just going, bro, just calm down, to myself, like, you're all right. You made it through yesterday. Really weren't having even any close calls, like you're okay. And then we get to we get and it's a good fucking thing because the hard shit was like later in the day on the second day. So we're going down this river and we have to portage because there's a dam. So that means you pull your boat out of the water and you walk with it. That's what portage means. And we get it placed where we need it and we keep floating. And then we get to this second dam. Well, we didn't even get to it. Like we're probably 3/4 of a mile away from it. And there's this stretch of, and as the water, as you imagine, as the water gets closer to a dam, it slows down because it's basically creating a lake. That's what the dam is for, is to create a big body of water. So now you're in a lake. There's no flow really, uh, and moving water, of course, it has a lot harder time freezing. So we really haven't seen any ice this whole time, but now we see this stretch that kind of goes across the whole lake of ice. And these dudes I'm with are like, well, we're gonna have to cut through it. I'm like, with what? With a fucking chainsaw or something? What are we doing here? And they just start ramming their boat into the ice, their kayak and their canoe. And they're like riding up on top of it and breaking through it. And it's, one point I watched this guy, he's just dragging himself across the ice and it's not, you can't get out and walk on it. It's not that thick. It's maybe 2 inches in it. Like I said, it's warm as shit that day. So it's getting thinner by the minute. And I'm like, that was one of the times where I'd go, all right, this is more risk than I'm interested in right now. This is more risk than I'm interested in. But I look around and it's either follow these guys through there or go to the marsh on one side or the marsh on the other side and try to, I don't know, go find a road or something. We're in the middle of nowhere, or paddle all the way back. Shit, like I'm kind of out of options. And I knew that there's two ways that you can handle this scenario. There's do it and risk massive failure, or there's wonder what might have happened if you didn't. And I know that second one, that's not a thing I'm interested in living with. Um, I take that same approach on so many things. If there's a chance to be taken, I'm probably going to take it because I don't want to wonder if I might have been able to do it. I don't want to wonder that. So here I am following these guys through this homemade 2 foot wide channel through this ice on this lake. And like, that was the most uncomfortable I was the whole time. And then we end up on a, we end up coming up to another section. We get through it and there's some open water, and then we get to this other section that's just pure ice all the way to the dam. And there's no, so a couple of the guys, they found a real thick section of ice and they drugged their boats down the ice all the way to the dam, got over the dam. And I'm like, when we got to that second section of ice, I'm like, you know what? Fuck, man. I'm not comfortable with this. I'm not wearing the gear. Like I got some tall boots on, but these guys are wearing waders and all this stuff where they go in the water, they're okay. I didn't have that shit. So I'm like, you know what? I'm cutting through those woods over there. You said there's a road over there, so that's where I'm going. So I drag my boat out to the road and I see this guy out in his yard. I'm like, hey man, can you give me a lift to the dam? He's like, yeah, no problem. It's a half a mile. So I get down to the back side of the dam and kind of sit there waiting for these guys to show up. But, I didn't have any problem with that. They kept saying that I cheated. But fuck it, man. Being resourceful, right? Work smarter, not harder. I didn't have a problem with that at all. If those guys feel like they have the skill set to challenge that, themselves like that, great, do it. You know, I had no pride in that moment. And speaking of pride, that's one of the big pieces that I was really actually proud of myself for on this trip. Like in so many situations, I had to ask these guys. Like one of the guys I know reasonably well, but the other two I've met them 2, 3 times. Like I don't know them that well at all. And I'm having to repeatedly ask these guys for help. Whether it's, hey, tell me which line I should take through this down tree. Where am I safer? Um, hey, pull my boat up onto the shore so I don't have to fall getting out of it. Like everything, I was at their mercy. Like I told them, I told these guys at one point around the fire, I'm like, thanks for pushing my wheelchair the whole trip, because that's basically what they were doing. And I'm okay with that, in that situation. I think that's a sign of maturity. There was a time in my life not that long ago when I would have just been like, I got to do it myself. I'm gonna prove to everybody here that I can. I'm not interested in proving shit to anybody anymore. The only person I ever have to prove anything to is myself, and that list is pretty fucking small at this point. I hope you could say the same thing. Um, yeah, the kayaking isn't a thing I try to get good at. I don't want to challenge myself because I kind of don't. It's not that big of a deal. Like I enjoy it, like it's all right, but I don't go nuts. Like these guys would be sitting around the fire and they're talking about all this camping gear and kayaking stuff and retelling stories from the day. And I mean, they were truly having a great time. I admire that, in anybody. But I was enduring it. One of the guys said to me, he said, I endure life, work, traffic, whatever, I endure life so that I can do stuff like this. And I thought about what he said, and that made sense to me because I've lived like that for lots of parts of my life. But I told him back that I endure stuff like this so that I can live my life. And that's truly why I was there. I wanted to make myself uncomfortable. I wanted I wanted a challenge. I wanted to do something I hadn't done. I wanted to bond with these guys because I like them. They're nice guys. Um, but essentially, yeah, that's what it is. Like I still do stuff like that just to go, yep, still got it. Yep, I can still handle a challenge and I'll be all right. Like building my house was a difficult challenge for me and I did it. And that only ended, I'm still kind of working on it, but I only got in it like in October, it's only a few months ago, and I'm already looking, for another challenge, something to do. And this trip was like that, but yeah, so the asking for help thing was huge. These guys didn't want to do it. And they're like 10 years younger than I am. And I can remember that. I remember exactly what that felt like to be like, nope, I'm doing it myself. Nope, I'm doing it myself. But you do that enough, and eventually you're like, I know I can. I know I can. And I would like this to be a little easier. So I'm going to ask for some help. And we had this conversation too, because I'm the older guy there, and I write books about this stuff, I kind of felt like I should impart some knowledge, right? So at one point, I said to them, because the one guy's telling me, I don't like asking for help, I don't do it. And so I told him, when you ask, specifically when you ask another man for help, because men don't like to ask for help, it's a pride thing. You are doing him a great favor. And follow me on this. Here's how this works. When you, so I won't ask for help from somebody usually unless I know I've helped them in some way, you know? Then I feel like, okay, I don't feel like I'm going into debt here, like in a personal economy. I did a whole show on that a couple years ago. And I know that nobody else is ever going to look at it that way. If somebody asks for help, you help them, that's it. There's no keeping score, usually, unless they're living in your basement. But that's kind of how that works. When you feel like you've helped somebody, it's easier to ask them for help. So when you ask someone for help and start that relationship by saying, hey man, I need a hand here, you're giving that man an opportunity to in the future more comfortably ask for your help, okay, which is a tremendous favor, right? So in a roundabout way, you're helping him by asking him for help because you're opening the door for him to ask you later on, and then you can help each other on stuff, and then it becomes no big deal, you know? And that's like a real good friendship. So I explained that to them, and I wonder if it's sunk in or not. Like I'm sure they're still going home full of pride, and that's a good thing. And but I wonder if that's sunk in. I kind of hope it did. Um, yeah, so that's the asking for help part. Um, being uncomfortable part, we talked about that. Some of the things that I learned, the one dude who was the leader of the trip, he's a real avid outdoorsman, knows a lot about being outside, hunting, trapping, like a real Jim Bridger type guy. It's actually really impressive how much he knows. And I knew that I would learn some things for him specifically about getting better at staying alive if something happened, right? It's part of your preparation for worst case scenarios. So I learned some some great stuff. Like, I brought like 2 liters of water. That's how much my Camelback holds, and I was through that in like a day. So I told the guys, I'm like, hey man, I'm out of water. What do I do? Do I just drink river water? And like, no, you can't do that. There's this Giardia thing that beavers carry, and if you get that, you got the hellified shits for like a week. Like it's terrible. You don't. So what they would do is they would go scoop out river water and put it in the coals of the fire until it boiled, let it cool off, and they would drink that. They'd use that to make coffee, use it to do everything. And cool. Learn that. Didn't know that. That's how you do it. So there again is another example on the side of fire keeping you alive, which is good. Um, the I learned that gear can save your life. Like I had a winter camping class in college, and so I understood like you don't wear cotton, and which fabrics will keep you warm even when they're wet. So I was dressed in that way, but you're still going to be cold. Like it's not like you're just as warm when you're wet as you are when you're dry. It doesn't matter what you're wearing. But learned how to dry stuff out around the fire, which seems kind of basic and easy, but you like my sleeping bag got wet the second day, so there's no way I was going to make it through the night with a wet sleeping bag. You would die. So I set up my chair and I had it against, I'm building the fire and I'm watching it very carefully and watching the steam roll off of this thing as it dried, and it got super dry, like it stunk like smoke, but I didn't care. I was able to reasonably comfortably make it through the night that second night because it wasn't all the way dry, but I shivered most of the night. But I learned how to do that, he kept telling me don't let it get too close because it's synthetic fabric, so it'll light on fire quick and it'll be gone. So I had to be very careful about that. Um, I learned, how to pack. Like there's some other gears. Again, they talk a lot about the gear. So you can get this little hand bilge pump for your boat. You can get, like I said, the waders were huge for everybody. Um, like my boat was a little bit too small for me, especially with the gear I had in it. Like the back of my boat was only about an inch out of the water when it was packed down with me in it, which that's not good. And again, the further you are deeper in the water, the more like a log across the river or a rock is going to impact you. The more you're displacing water, the further you are down, and the more it's going to fuck you up when you hit it. Um, so I learned that, man. If I ever did that again, I need a bigger boat. Like I have a 10-footer, I probably need a 12 or a 14. Um, yeah, I learned a lot. I learned a lot that I didn't know. And I watched these guys how comfortable they were in this environment and how easily they made the outdoors their bitch, basically. They had like really light foldable camp chairs. I had this giant, you know, camp chair with me that barely fit in my boat. And like there's a lot of nice gear out there. I started every fire that we had just because I was always cold, and that's the first thing I did when we got someplace. But um, yeah, that's how that went. But overall, like, going through some mental discomfort like that, it's good for you. I've talked about this before that for me, climbing high ladders, riding motorcycles, there's some things that I do in the summer that are they're not anywhere near as dangerous as this shit was, but what physically happens to you when you experience fear like that, it's an adrenal gland stimulation. So your body produces some adrenaline, which in turn, long term, creates more testosterone in your body. And I have definitely noticed that this week. Like my workouts have been fucking amazing. Like I'm pushing crazy weight and running really fast this week. And that is definitely as a result of the testosterone my body produced, as a result of making myself uncomfortable and a little bit scared. Um, it's good for you. Now you can't live like that all the time, but every once in a while you need a good blast of that. It's going to be good for you as a man. So find a way to get uncomfortable and to get yourself a little bit scared. That's good. So that was good, and it reminded me, of how really capable I am. By the last day, I was really over it. I told the guys, we'd been out on the water for like an hour and a half, and we had like probably 2.5 more hours to go. And they're like, "Well, we could do this." I'm like, "You know what, you guys? I'm fucking punched out. Like, I am over this shit. Let's just get to the truck, you know?" And not in a poopy pants way. I wasn't a wet. I hope those guys don't feel like that I was a wet blanket. I certainly didn't whine or complain. I just let them know when I felt uncomfortable. And, you know, these guys were really calm and they would be like, "You're all right. You're going to be okay." And that's good, but it's nice to hear that, that's for sure. But I don't know. I reminded myself of that, by that third day, we're going over all kinds of logs and stuff in the water and I'm just like, fuck it. I don't I'm if I go in, I go in. I'm only going to be, the risk of death is shorter. We're only a couple hours from the truck. I understand how hypothermia works. I'll be okay. Um, I'm okay. And I think mostly I just was very comfortable being uncomfortable by then. I wasn't nervous at all. I didn't shake anything off. I got myself in a couple of bad positions. And I remember at this one point, the one guy, "Hey, you're in a really bad spot right now." I'm like, "I got it." And I paddled myself out and I put myself to where I was fine. You know what I mean? So I did okay. And having that reminder there that you are very capable of doing difficult things when you need to is huge. At least have the practice of thinking about it. If the grid shuts down or we get attacked or the government turns against us, that's probably the most likely of all those scenarios. You know, I know I've been in tough situations and I handled it. If you haven't been, Rogan likes to say this and I like it too. The hardest thing anybody's ever been through is the hardest thing they've ever been through. So ratchet that up for yourself. Make the hard things that you've been through harder. A little bit harder each time, and then take a break, and then try another thing that's hard. My next step is to get on my motorcycle and go to, I don't know, Yellowstone or Mount Rushmore or something. I'll probably do that this summer. But I know now better what I need to pack. I need, like I know how to pack. I know what kind of maybe gear I need for that. I don't know if I'll be maybe camping sometimes or just catching motels or what, but um, I know I feel way more comfortable about that trip now after doing this kayak thing because I'm comfortable on my motorcycle. And if I fall off, it's going to suck, but, you know, a lot less chance of it. There's not logs across the road, right? There's not rapids on the highway, right? There's a lot less shit that's going to knock you off your motorcycle, right? Uh, so I feel like I'm better prepared for that. And man, I just have this confidence this week, after experiencing that, getting uncomfortable, being scared. It's fucking good for you, man. Comfort's a killer. Your life is really comfortable. So get uncomfortable. Get out there and do something hard. You know? It's you have to do it. You owe it to yourself. You're gonna be man, I was at Frozen Lake. I was fucking terrified. We're out in the middle of the lake. And I can barely keep myself balanced. And now I'm chopping through ice with this boat too. Fuck, man. Looking back, unwise. You know? But overall, it was okay. I had other people there and it was all right. It turned out okay. I never went in the water, and it was all right. So that's the deal. Go out and make yourself uncomfortable. Do hard things. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's going to produce more testosterone. It's going to make you more confident. It's going to help you in every way be better at being a man if you do that stuff. I recommend it to everybody. My name is Travis Neville. This is the Travis Neville Podcast. I wrote this book called Ideal Man, Reviving Masculinity. Please go buy it. That's the only way I make any money at this stuff. I make a few bucks off the podcast. You know, I get a check every month, but you certainly can't live on it. It's not very much. Books are about the only way I make anything, so if you jump into that, I'd appreciate it. I hope that in some way this show today about getting uncomfortable helped you to get your shit together. Have a great week.